So, as you might have gathered, I had plans to do another video this week, but that has been pushed back to after my 2-week break, which for anyone who is not aware why I'm having a 2-week break after this video, I'll leave a link to the community post I made 3 weeks ago in the pinned comment below this video. Given I've made 2 reaction videos talking about 3 big topics in the world of F1 and also a reaction video about a particular MotoGP topic, I felt I had a bit of an obligation to talk about these massive headlines from the pinnacle of motorsport in both the car world and bike world. So without any further hold-ups, let's get into these huge news stories. So let's start off with F1 before getting into the bigger news. For those who are somehow unaware, it was announced this past Monday that Esteban Ocon would be leaving Alpine at the end of his contract this year, bringing to an end 5 years with the French manufacturer. Ocon has been with Alpine since 2020, when the team were known as Renault, and during that time, it's safe to say Ocon has had a lot more success at the team than he had at Force India. And Manor, obviously. Ocon picked up his first ever podium in 2020 in the same race Sergio Perez took his first ever win, and then a year later he would go on to take his first ever win at the Hungarian Grand Prix. Ocon, ever since his first win, took another podium in 2023 at the rain-affected Monaco Grand Prix, and despite the fact that this year's Alpine has gone backwards compared to last year, Ocon, it's safe to say, has been the better of the 2 Alpine drivers, with him dragging the car in Q2 on some occasions before Alpine brought some upgrades to the car which has brought them slightly forward in the pecking order. However, it has felt for a while that there were tensions between Ocon and Alpine, given that throughout his career, Ocon has had a few run-ins with his teammates, some of which being his fault, others not so much, with him having a fierce relationship with Sergio Perez when he was at Force India, and then having a fruitful relationship with Fernando Alonso in 2022 due to the amount of aggressive battling the pair were doing throughout that year, with Jeddah and the Interlagos sprint race being the most notable. In 2023, Ocon would be partnered by Pierre Gasly, after Fernando Alonso departed the team to join Aston Martin, and Oscar Piastri went over to McLaren after Alpine messed around when it came to making a decision on who to partner Ocon. There were people who were fearful that this relationship wouldn't work, as during their karting days, Gasly and Ocon would have a fierce rivalry, and this led to there being tension between the pair of them even when they first arrived in Formula 1 in both 2016 and 2017 respectively. And it seemed like those fears may have turned into a reality, as in the third race of 2023, Gasly after the second red flag would shove his teammate into the wall at turn 2, ending both of their races as a result and costing the team a bucket load of points from that race. However, despite that blip in the season, for the most part the pair kept out of each other's way and both would pick up a good amount of points to ensure Alpine finished 6th in the Constructors, with Gasly just having the edge on Ocon that season, with him grabbing a sprint podium at Spa and then grabbing a podium at Zandvoort following Perez's time penalty. However, in 2024, the friction between Ocon and Gasly would start to come back, as at the start of the Japanese Grand Prix, Gasly, after getting a better start compared to Ocon, would swerve to the left of Esteban, seemingly trying to avoid Tsunoda, who was also heading towards the left. And then came the recent race at Monaco, where just before the red flag came out, due to a start crash involving Sergio Perez and the 2 Haas drivers, Ocon and Gasly, while heading up towards Casino, would make contact, nearly resulting in Ocon hitting the outside wall. And then at Portier, Ocon would go for a risky move on Gasly down the inside, resulting in the pair making contact and sending Ocon into the air, damaging his rear left suspension and almost costing the team a chance of points, with Gasly being lucky not to sustain any serious damage and was able to score a point for the team after the race was restarted. Although Ocon put his hand up and admitted he was at fault for the collision, which had led to the Frenchman getting a 5-place grid penalty for the Canadian Grand Prix, Bruno Famin, the president and team principal of Alpine, was not very happy, essentially shoving Ocon under the bus on French television and said that there would be consequences for the accident. This led to fans and people in the media to speculate that Ocon could be benched for one race, allowing either Jack Doohan or Mick Schumacher to race at Canada. Thankfully, this didn't happen, However, it's safe to say that the crash at Monaco ended up being the cherry on top of the cake in terms of Ocon's time at Alpine. And with Alpine getting off to a slow start this year, it basically gave Ocon another reason to leave the team. Now, in terms of my reaction to Ocon's departure, I can't say I'm not surprised. I think the whole fiasco of what happened at Monaco basically sealed Ocon's fate of the team, and I think it was a question of when he would leave as opposed to if he would leave. But now the question will be, where will Ocon go for next year and who will replace him at Alpine? Let's go over first where I believe Ocon could be next year, as like with Sainz, I do believe Ocon will still be on the grid next year, unlike when he was booted out of Force India at the end of 2018 to make way for Lance Stroll. For me, there are two teams that I believe Ocon will go to, and the one that has been the most rumoured out of the two is a move to Haas. Over the last few races, it has become more clear in my opinion that Haas will have an entirely new lineup in 2025, with Nico Hülkenberg making a return to Sauber next year in time for Audi's takeover of the team in 2026, and it looking like that Kevin Magnussen will probably get the boot from the team as a result of K-Mag having a frustrating season so far, with him causing numerous accidents this season, with Miami and the recent race at Monaco being the most notable. With it becoming more likely that Oliver Behrman will be replacing Nico Hülkenberg next year, the team is probably going to want an experienced driver to partner alongside him, and with K-Mag potentially being shown the exit door, Ocon would be the perfect fit to suit that criteria, and could be the perfect teammate for Ollie to learn from, given the potential the Brit has already shown when he drove for Ferrari at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, substituting for the ill Carlos Sainz. Plus, the idea of Ocon joining Haas isn't as bizarre as what most people would think, as ever since Io Komatsu took over as team principal, the team does seem to now have a clear direction, and with Ocon joining them, the team could potentially make significant progress. And with Haas's NASCAR team sadly closing shop at the end of this year, there's surely no excuse for Gene Haas not to pump any more of his money into his F1 team. The other option for Ocon could be a move to Mercedes. With Hamilton moving to Ferrari, and with Alonso staying at Aston Martin for at least the next 2 years, the team is looking for someone to possibly play a supporting role for George Russell, given that Marc see George as their future, along with Kimi Antonelli, who is also a contender for the second Mercedes seat should he get the required super license points to compete in F1. If Kimi doesn't achieve this, I can see Mercedes giving Ocon the seat, given that team principal Toto Wolff still manages Ocon to this very day. Whether the Frenchman will be there for more than 1 year, given that Antonelli is waiting in the wings, remains to be seen. In terms of who will replace Ocon at Alpine, I think there are 3 candidates. 2 of them, which I mentioned earlier, are Jack Doohan and Mick Schumacher. Jack is currently the reserve driver for Alpine and has been since the second half of 2022, following the fallout from the Piastri contract saga. At one point, Jack was a strong contender to replace Ocon if the Frenchman got benched for Canada, and with him being a reserve driver for so long, this would be the best way for Alpine to repay him. Mick could also be a contender for Alpine, as although he is the reserve driver for Mercedes, he is currently driving for Alpine in the World Endurance Championship, and with him having 2 years of experience in F1, that could give Mick a bit of leverage compared to Jack. The other contender in my opinion could be Valtteri Bottas. With Sauber looking increasingly likely to have a new lineup next year, with Cho also looking highly likely to leave the team as well, Valtteri's experience in F1 could be quite valuable to a team like Alpine, as the team tries to get out of the current situation that they find themselves in at the moment. Whether Alpine could revitalise Valtteri's career or not, given the tough few seasons he's had at Sauber, remains to be seen. Let me know your opinions of Ocon's departure in the comments below and where you believe he will end up next year, along with who will replace him at Alpine. Now on to the next story, which in my opinion is a much bigger story than Ocon's departure. On the same day Ocon's departure from Alpine was confirmed, MotoGP decided to overshadow this announcement by essentially breaking the internet. At around 10 to 3 in the UK, Autosport reported that Marc Marquez was on his way to the Ducati factory team for 2025, replacing Enea Bastianini and partnering alongside the reigning world champion Pecco Bagnaia. Whilst the news of Anir departing from Ducati wasn't a surprise, the news that Marc would end up being his replacement was, as for a while, the general consensus was that current championship leader Jorge Martin would be the one to partner alongside Pecco, given Martin made it quite clear that he wanted to be with a factory team for next year, indicating that he didn't want to be with Pramac for another season, despite the fact that Pramac are in a position to fight for the title and are allowed to fight with the Ducati factory team. With Ducati not willing to provide a fifth 2025 bike for any of their two other teams, which are VR46 and Gresini, the latter of which Marc currently rides for, it led to the consensus that Marc, who made it clear that he wanted to ride an up-to-date bike for next year, would replace Martin at Pramac, given that they are allowed to fight for the title, thanks to them having up-to-date Ducatis, and the fact that Marc has a strong relationship with Red Bull, whereas the Ducati factory team has a strong relationship with Monster. However, during the pre-weekend press conference, Marc, when asked about the prospect of him joining Pramac, immediately shot this down, as whilst he acknowledged how well the team were doing, he ruled himself out of joining the team, stating that he was either staying at Gresini or joining the factory team. Now, when I heard this answer from Marc, I initially thought he was joking, as why would anyone, especially of Marc's calibre, turn down the opportunity to ride for a title challenging team like Pramac, especially when it was looking like Martin was joining the factory team and the fact that Ducati would not run a fifth 2025 bike. So basically, I didn't take much notice of this answer and just assumed that Marc was bluffing and that he would be on his way to Pramac anyway. Well, it's safe to say a day after the Italian Grand Prix at Mugello, he wasn't bluffing. Marc essentially gave out a warning shot to Ducati, who themselves, according to La Gazzetta dello Sport, were caught off guard by this response, basically giving Ducati an ultimatum. Either agree to one of those options that Marc mentioned in the pre-weekend press conference, or risk losing him to another manufacturer, such as Aprilia or KTM. And with Ducati still not willing to supply a fifth 2025 bike, it left only one option if they wanted to keep Marc within the Ducati family. And although nothing has been confirmed yet at the time of recording, it looks 99% certain that Ducati have signed him to the factory team for 2025, essentially leaving Martin in the wilderness. Or so we thought. A few days before the Italian Grand Prix at Mugello, Martin was seen at Maranello, specifically taking a tour around the Ferrari headquarters. Now, why is this important, you might be asking? Well, he wasn't the only one on that tour, as with him at the Ferrari HQ was his good friend Aleix Espargaro, who at the previous race at Barcelona announced that he would be retiring from MotoGP at the end of the season, and also with them was the Aprilia team boss Massimo Rivola. Anticipating a chance that Ducati would give Marquez the factory ride, and not wanting to stay at Pramac for another year, Martin lined up a backup plan in case the Ducati factory ride fell through. And when Marquez dropped that bombshell during the pre-weekend press conference at Mugello, Martin, after the race had concluded, rang up Rivola about striking a deal for 2025, to which he signed and sealed a day later. And so, a few hours after Autosport dropped the Marquez news, it was announced that Martin would indeed be moving to Aprilia for 2025, signing a multi-year deal with the other Italian manufacturer. With Martin being confirmed at Aprilia for next year, it makes it more obvious that Marc will be with the Ducati factory team for next year, and it makes it clear that Ducati were willing to sacrifice not holding on to Martin in order to keep the most recognised rider on the current MotoGP grid in their ranks. In terms of my reaction to these huge news stories, it's safe to say that I was pretty shocked when I saw Marquez's name pop up for the Ducati factory ride, as I was convinced Martin was going to get the ride. However, at the same time, I am definitely looking forward to 2025. To see Marquez potentially have a shot at winning the title with the factory team next year, and the potential of there being an inter-team rivalry between himself and Pecco, is one that will excite any fan of MotoGP, and potentially new ones as well, who want to get into the sport. The only question now for Marc is what will happen with his partnership with Red Bull. Do Ducati split up with Monster to allow Marquez to continue to have his Red Bull branding on his helmet, or does Marc cut ties with Red Bull in order to ride for the factory team? Only time will tell, I guess. In terms of Martin moving to Aprilia, that is a move that I am also looking forward to. Aprilia's progression during their return to MotoGP has been very exciting to watch, but for a while it has felt that the team has not had a rider capable of fighting for the title despite the talents of both Aleix Espargaro and Maverick Viñales. Now, with Martin joining the team, who has proven himself to be a worthy title contender in MotoGP, Aprilia has the chance to finally take it to their Italian rivals, and it would be great to see another manufacturer be in the mix for the title, rather than it just being the Ducati Cup. But the question on everyone's lips is, what will happen with Enea Bastianini? Although it was expected that he would be leaving the Ducati factory team at the end of the year, the general consensus was that he would be the one to replace Aleix at Aprilia and partner alongside Maverick Viñales, who after finally grabbing his first ever win on an Aprilia, looks highly likely to remain at the team for another year, despite initial rumours that he could be booted out by Fabio Quartararo before the Frenchman signed a new 2-year deal with Yamaha, which to this day still baffles me. So much for that prediction I made in that Marquez video I made last year. However, after Marc dropped his bombshell, which led to Martin being Aleix's replacement instead, it has now left a question mark on where Enea could go for next year. Now initially, I thought he would go to Pramac, staying with the Ducati family and still being on a competitive bike and also on a bike that he is familiar with. However, the general consensus now is that he could be a contender for the GasGas KTM team as a result of KTM announcing that Pedro Acosta would partner alongside Brad Binder at the factory KTM team for next year, and the fact that there are rumours that KTM could offer factory support to both the GasGas bikes for next year. In terms of who will replace Martin at Pramac, I initially thought that Marco Bezzecchi would be the obvious contender for that ride, despite the tricky season that he is having so far. However, rumours have recently emerged that Miguel Oliveira could be a strong contender for Pramac, and if Pramac stays with Ducati for next year, as there have been rumours that they could switch to Yamaha, the prospect of Miguel potentially fighting for a title next year could be very exciting, and it would then allow for Joe Roberts to make his move to Trackhouse for next season, which has been heavily rumoured. In terms of Gresini though, should Pramac switch to Yamaha next year, I can see Fermin Aldeguer being Marc's replacement at the team, as you would imagine they would be the team to have the up-to-date Ducatis, which would kinda make the whole Marquez moving to the factory team and Martin moving to Aprilia seem pointless. But if Pramac do stick with Ducati, which I'm inclined to think they will given Team's Gino Bozoi hinted they would at Mugello, then honestly, I don't know who will replace Marc at Gresini, as there isn't an obvious contender out there outside of Aldeguer if Pramac switches to Yamaha. Let me know who you think will get the Pramac and Gresini rides in the comments below, and also your reaction to the Marc Marquez and Jorge Martin news, along with the rumours that Enea is off to GasGas. Thanks for watching my reaction to these huge news stories, and I will see you in 3 weeks' time for the next video. Hopefully no breaking news stories happen while I'm away.